I assumed it would be another work trip, so I took my daughter to the airport that evening. Everything appeared to be normal, until my 7-year-old grandson firmly grasped my hand. His terrified gaze held me motionless. Something inside me snapped when he muttered, "Grandma, don't let us go back to the house. I heard Mama planning something against us this morning. Please believe me." His voice was shaking. I started the car and ran away with him into the night, without question. Prior to moving on, however, please confirm that you have already subscribed to the channel and mention in the comments where you are seeing this video. We enjoy tracking the progress of our articles. Arbinum is my name. I am 70 years old, and up until that evening, I felt like I knew my daughter Candace by heart. Since my son-in-law Reggie passed away 3 years ago, I have been living with her and my grandson Devin. We were all deeply scarred by the automobile accident, but young Devin was particularly affected and has since grown up to be a shy and perceptive child. We took Candace to Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport on Thursday so she could travel to Chicago for work. She manages marketing at a large company and travels a lot. We got there early. The air conditioner's cold blast caused me to pull my thin coat tighter about me, and the terminal was comparatively deserted. "Mama, it will just be 3 days." As she made adjustments to her carry-on bag, Candace grinned. Remember Devin's meds and take good care of him." Devin was standing next to me, observing his mother intently while gripping his dinosaur backpack hard. He has never been a talkative boy, but he was much more reserved that evening. "My darling, everything will be all right." "Devin, don't we always manage to make things work?" My grandson simply nodded silently when I attempted to engage him in the conversation. In front of her kid, Candace knelt down and brushed the hair away from his eyes. "Be kind to your grandmother." "Mama, go. I will return shortly." Devin stood motionless like a tiny statue as she planted a kiss on his forehead. My heart swelled as I observed my daughter. She had grown into a strong, self-reliant woman in spite of the difficulties. Perhaps, as an escape from the agony of losing her husband, she immersed herself into her work with even more vigor. Even though I saw a certain emotional distance developing between us, I still respected her fortitude. She said, "I have to go," as she looked at her watch. "In 30 minutes, boarding will begin." We gave each other a quick embrace, a cold, mechanical embrace that had been the norm between us in recent years. She gave me a cheek kiss, picked up her suitcase, and headed for the gate. She vanished into the crowd as we watched her silhouette fade away. Taking my grandson's hand, I said, "Let's go, Devon. It's getting late." We strolled towards the parking garage along the terminal hallway. Devin remained silent the entire time. I wasn't concerned by his quiet. It was simply his style. He used gestures and glances more than words to communicate since his father's accident. It was dimly illuminated in the parking garage. The concrete floor was covered with shapeless shadows from a few yellow lamps. At this hour, not many cars were parked. Our vintage Chevy Impala's lights flickered when I hit the alarm button. I took Devin by the hand and began to go in the direction of the car. I had a powerful, nearly violent pull at that moment. Devin had abruptly stopped and was holding onto my wrist so tightly that my creased skin was marked by his tiny fingernails. Confused, I turned around. I lowered myself to his level and said, "What is it, sweetie?" Under the pole's yellowish light, Devin's face was pale. His normally alert eyes were now wide with sheer fear. His small face had a look I had never seen before. A shiver went down my back. I had to bend over to hear him murmur, "Grandma, don't let us return to the house. Please believe me. Don't worry, my love," I said, standing there perplexed, wondering if he was scared of the empty house without his mother. "We'll be all right." He firmly grasped my wrist and shook his head, saying, "No, Grandma, just the two of us for a few days." "Don't go back to the house," he repeated, his voice now cracking. "This morning I heard Mama on the phone in the home office. She was talking about us." My heart pounded. "What did you hear, Devin?" He swallowed, his lips trembling slightly. He leaned in even closer to my ear. "Mama said after we fell asleep that everything was ready. She said, make sure there are no mistakes. The gas has to look like an accidental leak." My blood froze in my veins. I stood paralyzed, staring at those innocent eyes that now carried the weight of a terrible secret. "Please, Grandma." His voice was a shaky thread. "Believe me this time." That last sentence hit me like a slap. I remembered other times Devin had tried to warn me. When he said he saw his mother hiding papers in the office. When he mentioned she had spent all night messing with the kitchen pipes. I had always thought they were not going home tonight. The relief in his gaze was immediate and so profound that it dispelled any lingering doubt I might have had. He knew, Somehow this 7-year-old child had uncovered a horrific plan. I stood up on shaky legs. My mind raced. If what Devon was saying was true, we couldn't just go to a hotel or a friend's house. Candace could trace the credit card. She could call everyone we knew. I got into the car with Devon, helped him buckle his seatbelt, and sat behind the wheel. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the key into the ignition. "Where are we going, Grandma?" Devon asked, his small voice breaking the tense silence. I had no idea. I looked in the rearview mirror at his worried little face and tried to sound confident. "We're going somewhere safe, sweetie. I just need to think for a minute." I started the engine and slowly backed out of the parking spot. We needed time. We needed a plan. And above all, we needed to find out why my own daughter wanted us dead. I drove for almost an hour with no clear destination, just getting further away from our house. Devon fell asleep in the back seat, overcome by emotional exhaustion. I occasionally glanced at him in the mirror, his face serene in contrast to the terror he had shown in the parking garage. How could a child so small bear such a heavy secret? As I drove through the increasingly deserted city streets, my mind worked frantically, trying to connect the dots. Candace had changed in recent months. That was undeniable. More distant, more impatient, always locked in the home office, making calls in hushed tones. I had attributed everything to grief, work, stress, and the pressures of being a single mother. But now, recalling every detail, every strange look, every interrupted conversation when I walked into the room, a sinister pattern began to form. I stopped the car at a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of the city. We needed a plan, and I needed to think clearly. I bought a watery cup of coffee from the convenience store and returned to the car, watching Devon, who was still asleep. That's when my cell phone vibrated in my coat pocket. Candace's name lit up the screen. My heart leaped. Her flight should have taken off hours ago. Why was she calling? With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello. Hey, Mama." Candace's voice sounded strangely calm. "Where are you?" My spine tingled. How did she know we weren't home? "You should have been home an hour ago." Devon was hungry, so I tried to sound stable. As I said, "Oh, we decided to stop for dinner." There was a pause on the other end. "I see. Where are you eating dinner, by the way?" I gave a hazy response. "At that restaurant by the mall." "You ought to be on the plane." "Right." She blurted out that there was an issue with the aircraft. The new date was set for early tomorrow. "I'm going home right now." I went cold. That didn't make sense. Candace always kept a close eye on airline. She would never allow such an unforeseen circumstance to occur. "Oh," I said, attempting to sound normal. "What a shame. Then, we'll meet you at home." "Yes, of course," she answered, her voice suddenly lovely. "Don't worry about hurrying. Savor your meal. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I hung up and stared at the phone. It was a trap. She was checking to see if we had figured anything out. Maybe she had cameras at the house. Maybe she realized Devon had overheard her that morning. Devon stirred in the back seat, slowly opening his eyes. "Was that Mama?" he asked with a shrewdness that scared me. I nodded, unable to hide the truth from those perceptive eyes. "She said the flight was canceled. She's coming back home." Devon's eyes widened in terror. "She knows, Grandma. She knows we found out." I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in my hands. "Devon, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard this morning. Everything. Every single detail." He sat up straight, smoothing his wrinkled t-shirt. He looked much older than his 7 years as he began to speak. "Mama woke up really early. I heard her in the hallway and thought she was making breakfast, but she went to the office and closed the door." He hesitated, looking down. "I know I shouldn't have, but I went over there and listened behind the door." "It's okay, sweetie. Keep going." She was talking really low, but I managed to hear. She said, "Yes, they'll be alone. 3 days is plenty of time to make it appear to be an accident. The gas leaked during the night while they sleep. Nobody will suspect." Devon paused, taking a deep breath, and then said something about papers and insurance money. She said, "Once they're out of the way, I can finally access everything." A shiver ran through my body. Insurance papers. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. 6 months ago, my late husband Reggie had left the documents for a substantial life insurance policy. Candace knew that I was the primary beneficiary with specific clauses that allotted a considerable portion to Devon, which he could only access when he turned 21. Candace was the fund administrator, but she couldn't touch the money, not while I was alive. There was also the house, the house that belonged to Reggie and me, and which after his death passed entirely to me. Candace lived with us, but the property was mine, a property that was constantly appreciating with the neighborhood's growth. Devin, I asked, my voice trembling, did you hear your mother talking about money or Grandpa's insurance before? He nodded slowly. Lots of times. She always gets very angry when she talks about it. Once she said on the phone that she was stuck because of us. Every word was like a knife in my heart. My own daughter, plotting to kill us for money. It was so absurd, so monstrous that my mind resisted accepting it. But the evidence was all there. The change in her behavior, the sudden interest in financial matters, the constant questions about my will, the business trips that seemed to spring up from nowhere. And now this fake canceled trip. She wanted to catch us off guard. She wanted to ensure we would be home sleeping when the accident happened. What are we going to do, Grandma? Devin asked, his small voice bringing me back to reality. I looked at this extraordinary child who had sensed the danger before I did, who had saved our lives with his observation and courage. First, we're going to get even farther away, I replied, starting the car engine again. And then we're going to get evidence. Evidence? Devin asked, confused. Yes, sweetie. Proof that shows your mother is planning something terrible, something we can take to the police. Devin nodded gravely. This was not a conversation a grandmother should be having with her grandson. It was not a weight a child should carry, but we were in this together. It was just the two of us against someone I never would have imagined as an enemy. As I drove through the night, an idea began to form in my mind. A risky plan, but one that might give us the proof we needed. Devin, I said, looking at him in the rearview mirror. Do you remember Mr. Harrison, the doorman at our old apartment building? He nodded. Wallace Harrison was an old friend, a discreet and reliable man who had worked for decades in the building where we lived before moving into the house. I think we need to pay him a visit, I said, steering toward the old neighborhood. It was a risky gamble, but at that moment, we didn't have many options. We needed a safe place to spend the night, and more importantly, we needed help to expose Candace before she could try again. The car's clock read 1:20 a.m. when we finally reached the old building. My heart pounded as I parked on the parallel street, away from the building's security cameras. If Candace was truly looking for us, we couldn't leave clues. Stay here for just a minute, Devin, I said, turning off the engine. Grandma is going to check if Mr. Harrison is on the night shift. I got out of the car and walked quickly to the security booth, staying in the shadows. The booth was lit, and to my relief, there was Wallace Harrison, his wrinkled face bent over a crossword magazine. I tapped lightly on the glass, and he looked up, confused at first, then surprised to recognize me. Mara. He stood up, opening the booth door. What are you doing here at this hour? I looked around uneasily, and said in a low voice, Wallace, please pardon me for coming like this, but I have a serious problem. I need your help. The small staff apartment in the back of the building was simple but cozy. Wallace had lived there since his wife passed away 10 years ago. It was a discreet space with a separate entrance, invisible to anyone who didn't know the building well. Perfect for what we needed, a temporary hiding place. Devin was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping hot chocolate that Wallace had made. The old doorman watched us with concern, still processing the incredible story I had just told him. Mara. Wallace finally spoke, his grave voice breaking the silence. Are you sure about this? It's a very serious accusation against your own daughter. I sighed heavily. I know, Wallace, it sounds like madness. I don't want to believe it myself. I looked at Devon, who kept his eyes fixed on the cup. But I can't ignore what Devon heard, and there are other signs that I'm only now connecting. Wallace nodded slowly, rubbing his wrinkled chin. He had known our family for decades. He had seen Candace grow up. He had wept at my husband's funeral. What do you plan to do, Mizala? We need proof, he asked. If we go to the police now with just the testimony of a 7-year-old and my suspicions, they won't take us seriously, I said, my mind still working on the plan that had begun to emerge in the car. Candace is well liked. Her career is strong. Wallace grimaced, but he didn't argue. He knew I was correct. They'll say it's just a misunderstanding, or worse, that I'm getting senile. And where do I fit into this story? I remarked, feeling Devin stiffen next to me. I need to go back to the house, he added, not to stay, but to look for evidence. What exactly was Candace planning? I must know, and I need Devin to stay here safely while I do that. No, Grandma, Devin cried, thudding the mug into the table. It's risky. Mama might come back. I took his cold little hands in mine. I know, sweetie, but I'm going to be careful. I'm just going to take a quick look in her office to see if I can find any clues. I'll be in and out before she realizes." Devin shook his head, tears glistening in his eyes. "I don't want you to go. I don't want to stay alone." "You won't be alone," I reassured him. "Mr. Harrison will stay with you, and I promise I'll be back soon." "You shouldn't go alone," Wallace intervened, worry evident on his face. "If what you say is true, it's too risky." "I don't have a choice," I replied. "If Candace finds out we know something, she can destroy any evidence, or worse, she might try something more direct." I shuddered at the possibilities. "I need to act now while she still believes we suspect nothing." Wallace sighed, running his hand through his gray hair. "At least, let me drive you there. I'll wait in the car on the corner. If you don't come out in 20 minutes, I'm calling the police." I nodded. It was better than going completely alone. "I want to go too," Devin insisted. "No, sweetie," I said firmly. "It's too dangerous. I need you to stay here safe. I promise I'll be back." After more insistence, Devin finally gave in, but not before hugging me with enough force to take my breath away. "Promise you'll be careful, Grandma," he whispered in my ear. "Promise me." "I promise you," I replied, kissing his forehead. Wallace lent us an old burner phone, the kind without registration, so we could communicate without using my phone, which Candace might trace. We agreed on the codes. 1 ring, and hang up, meant I was fine. 2 rings meant trouble. After making sure Devin was comfortable on the small sofa bed in the apartment with strict instructions to lock the door and not open it for anyone but us, Wallace and I left heavy-hearted about what I was about to do. The dashboard clock read 1:20 a.m. when we stopped a block away from my house. The streets were completely deserted, just a few lampposts casting long shadows on the asphalt. "I have a bad feeling about this," Miss Era Wallace murmured, turning off the engine. "Are you sure you want to go?" I swallowed, observing the dark silhouette of my house at the end of the street. The windows were all dark. There was no sign of Candace's car in the driveway. "I don't have a choice," I repeated, more to convince myself than him. 20 minutes, just like we agreed. "If I don't come back or call the police." Wallace nodded gravely. "God protect you." I got out of the car and walked quickly down the sidewalk, keeping to the shadows. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure anyone yards away could hear it. The house was silent when I used my key to enter through the back door. I closed it softly behind me and stood still in the dark kitchen, listening intently. There was nothing but the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick-tock of the living room clock. I took out the small flashlight I had brought and illuminated the path to the hallway. I needed to reach Candace's office on the 2nd floor without making a sound. Every floorboard that creaked under my feet seemed like thunder in the silence of the house. Reaching the foot of the stairs, I froze. A strange smell floated in the air, sweet and chemical at the same time. I sniffed again, trying to identify it. It wasn't gas. It was something different, something that shouldn't be there. Climbing the stairs seemed like an eternity, each step carefully calculated to avoid the steps that usually creaked. In the 2nd floor hallway, I stopped in front of Candace's office door. It was locked, as I expected. I took out the hairpin I had prepared from my pocket. Years ago, when Candace was a teenager and locked her room door during her tantrums, I had learned to pick simple locks like this one. I never thought I would use that skill in a situation like this. After a few tense minutes, I heard the satisfying click of the lock yielding. I pushed the door open slowly, praying the hinges wouldn't squeak. Candace's office was immaculately organized as always. Shelves with books on management and marketing, a dark wood desk with a closed laptop, a leather swivel chair, nothing out of place. I closed the door behind me and started my search. The laptop was password protected, so I focused on the physical documents. I carefully opened drawers, examined folders, and searched every corner for anything suspicious. It was in the 3rd desk drawer that I found something. A red folder different from the others, hidden under a pile of company documents. Inside were bank statements I had never seen before, accounts in names I didn't recognize, large money transfers to a certain M. Sellers, and most alarming, a copy of my life insurance policy with handwritten notes in the margin about values and payout clauses. My heart pounded. It was real. Everything Devin had heard was real. My own daughter was plotting. A noise downstairs interrupted my thoughts. The unmistakable sound of the front door opening. I froze, blood chilling in my veins. Candace was back. I quickly grabbed my cell phone and dialed Wallace's number. 2 rings. Then I hung up, the signal for trouble. Immediately, I photographed the most incriminating documents with the phone's camera. There was no time to examine everything, but I needed evidence. I put the folder back exactly as I found it and hid behind the office door, turning off the flashlight. I heard footsteps on the stairs now, slow and deliberate steps. It didn't sound like Candace's firm, hurried walk. It was more cautious. Adrenaline surged through my veins. I was cornered. If I left the office, I would be seen. If I stayed, I would be found when Candace came in to work in the morning, or worse, if she decided to enter the office. Now, the steps stopped in the hallway. I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. A shadow moved under the door crack, blocking the faint hallway light. Someone was out there standing as if listening. I held my breath, feeling cold sweat run down my back. The door handle slowly began to turn. The office door opened a few inches with an almost imperceptible groan. I stayed motionless, pressed against the wall behind the door, barely breathing. The darkness was my only ally. Now a silhouette was cast on the office floor. It wasn't Candace. The height was different, taller and wider. A man. The shadow stood still for a few moments, as if whoever it was listening intently. Then Candace's voice came from downstairs, muffled by the distance. "Marcus, is everything clear up there?" My heart stopped for a second. Marcus, the same name that appeared on the bank statements. M. Sellers, just checking. A deep male voice replied, only a few feet away from me. "The house is empty. No sign of them. I told you something was wrong." Candace's voice sounded irritated now. "Closer. They should be here. The plan was for tomorrow night, after I got back from the trip. Now the timeline is all messed up." Candace's steps were coming up the stairs. I was trapped between two people who were apparently plotting my death. My only way out was the office window, which opened onto a narrow ledge over the backyard. A dangerous fall for anyone, lethal for a 70-year-old woman. I said involving the kid was risky. The male voice continued, now moving away from the door toward the hallway. "Kids are unpredictable. He might have heard something." "Impossible," Candace replied. "Now, in the hallway. Devin never wakes up before 7, and I always talk in the office with the door closed. Besides, even if he did hear, who would believe?" A dull thump came from downstairs, followed by a muffled curse. "What was that?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "I'll check." In response to Candace's worried question, "You keep getting her room ready." The man's footsteps quickly retreated down the stairs. Candace stayed in the hallway for a few more seconds. Then I heard her steps heading to my room at the end of the hall. My mind raced. Haroon, getting my room ready. What were they doing? And what was that noise downstairs? Wallace must have come into the house after receiving my trouble signal. My old friend trying to help me was now also in danger. I slipped out from behind the door, moving slowly to avoid making noise. Through the crack in the door, I could see the hallway was empty. Now, on tiptoes, I approached the office window. I needed to get out of there and call the police. Not only was my life in danger, but so was Wallace's, and most importantly, Devin's. I opened the window with extreme care, avoiding any sound. The ledge was narrower than I imagined, only about 1 foot wide. Below, the 20-feet drop ended in the backyard grass. In other times, I wouldn't even consider this option, but desperation is a powerful motivator. I put 1 foot outside, feeling the cold morning air. I had to gather all my courage to put the other leg through the window and balance precariously on the ledge. My joints protested. Arthritis is no joke at 70, but fear gave me an agility I didn't know I still possessed. Suddenly, I heard agitated voices downstairs. A dull thud followed by a groan. My heart clenched as I recognized Wallace's voice. They had caught him. "Who else is with you, old man?" Marcus' rough voice echoed through the house. "How did you know to come in here?" I couldn't hear Wallace's response, but the sound of something heavy falling made me shudder. I closed my eyes for a second, silently, begging my old friend's forgiveness. I couldn't help him now. Our best chance was for me to escape and find help. I started moving sideways along the ledge, inch by inch, my back pressed against the wall, my fingers clutching the rough texture. Sweat ran down my face despite the cold night. There was a lattice covered in ivy on the corner of the house. If I could reach it, maybe I could use it to climb down to the garden. It was risky, but less so than jumping straight down. "Candace, I found someone," Marcus's voice shouted from inside the house. "An old guy trying to sneak in the back way." "What? Who is he?" My daughter's voice sounded distant, coming from my room. "He won't talk, but he seems to know your mother. She must be nearby." I froze on the ledge. They knew I was in the house. The search would intensify. I no longer had time for caution. I needed to act. With a surge of adrenaline, I reached the lattice and began to climb down, ignoring the pain in my joints and the scratches from the wooden stakes. I half slipped, half climbed the last few feet, landing awkwardly on the grass with a dull thud that sent a jolt of pain through my left hip. There was no time to mourn. I staggered to my feet and ran as quietly as I could across the backyard, toward the low wall that divided our property from the Miller family's house next door. As I scurried through the shadow of the trees, I heard the office window being opened violently. A flashlight beam swept the yard, almost catching me. I ducked behind a bush, holding my breath. "Is anyone down there?" "I'm going to check," Marcus said, his voice resounding through the darkness. "Keep the old man tied up." I scrambled over the wall with difficulty, falling onto the other side into the Miller's yard. Our elderly neighbors, who fortunately were heavy sleepers and traveling. I ran across their lawn, skirting the house, feeling a sharp twinge in my hip with every step. When I reached the parallel street, I was already gasping for breath, but fear kept me going. I got as far away from the house as possible, running through the shadows until I reached a main avenue where a few bars were still open with people on the sidewalk. I grabbed the burner phone and dialed 911 with trembling hands. As I waited for someone to answer, I checked the photos I had taken of the documents in the office. The proof we needed was there. "Police, what is your emergency?" The operator's calm voice sounded on the phone. "My name is Alar Binham," I said, trying to control the tremble in my voice. "I need to report an attempted murder. My daughter is plotting to kill me and my grandson for insurance money. She has an accomplice, and they just captured a friend of mine who tried to help me." There was a pause on the other end. I could imagine what the operator was thinking. Just another paranoid old woman imagining conspiracies. "Ma'am, where are you right now?" he asked, his tone professional but cautious. "On the I-85 service road near the 500 block. I'm running from my house. Please, I need you to send patrols to 237 Magnolia Lane. My friend Wallace Harrison is in mortal danger." "Do you have any proof of these accusations?" "I have photograph documents and a witness, my 7-year-old grandson, who heard my daughter planning everything." I hesitated, then added, "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Please, there's no time to lose." As I spoke, a patrol car passed slowly down the avenue. I waved frantically, still holding the phone to my ear. To my relief, the patrol car stopped. 2 police officers got out, approaching with cautious expressions. "The police are here," I told the operator. "I'm going to explain the situation to them." The next few minutes were a blur. I quickly explained the situation to the officers, showing them the photos of the documents on the phone. I mentioned Devon, safe in Wallace's apartment, and Wallace's own situation, possibly injured and held hostage in my house. Something in my urgency, or the evidence I presented, must have convinced the police. One of them spoke into the radio, requesting backup, while the other helped me into the patrol car. "We'll rescue your friend first," said the older officer, a man whose face was marked by years of service. "Then we'll find your grandson. Can you give us the exact address of where he is?" I provided the address of the old building and instructions on how to reach the staff apartment. My worry now was that Candace and her accomplice, realizing I had escaped, might figure out where Devon was. Would she remember Wallace and our old friendship? The patrol car sped through the nearly deserted streets at that hour of the morning. 2 other patrol cars followed us, sirens, silent, only their lights flashing in the night. My heart pounded as we approached my house. "There's an entry through the back," I explained to the officer, "the kitchen door. Wallace must be downstairs." We stopped at a safe distance. The police asked me to wait in the patrol car while they surrounded the house. I watched, distressed, as they positioned themselves, communicating via radios. It seemed like an eternity, though it was probably only a few minutes. Then everything happened very quickly. I heard police officers shouting, "Freeze," followed by the sound of breaking glass. A door slammed violently, more shouts, a crash, and then silence. Minutes later, I saw Wallace being helped out of the house by 2 officers. My old friend was limping with a visible cut on his forehead, but he was alive. I felt such immense relief that tears streamed down my face. Immediately after, Marcus came out in handcuffs, escorted by 2 officers. He was a hefty man with tattoos on his arms and a furious expression on his face. I waited, heart pounding, for Candace, but she didn't appear. The older officer approached the patrol car where I was waiting. "The house is clear, ma'am, but your daughter isn't here." It seemed she fled out the back when she realized we'd arrived. A chill ran down my spine. "Devon," I whispered, "we need to get to my grandson before she does." The patrol car sliced through the night at full speed, siren blaring. This time, I sat in the back seat, my hands twisting with anxiety. Beside me, Wallace, with a makeshift bandage on his forehead, seemed equally worried. "She didn't know where we were," he said, trying to calm me. I didn't mention the apartment when they caught me, but I couldn't be calmed. A dark premonition was growing in my chest. Candace was smart. She knew my old friends, my old habits. If she remembered Wallace, she might deduce where to look. When we arrived at the old building, my heart almost stopped. The service door leading to the staff apartment was ajar. "Stay here," the officer ordered, drawing his weapon. But I couldn't obey. I jumped out of the patrol car and ran after him, ignoring the protests. Wallace followed me, limping. The hallway was dark and silent. The apartment door was closed, apparently untouched. The officer knocked 3 times. "Devon," I called, my voice trembling. "Devon, sweetie, it's Grandma. Are you present?" Silence, a silence that pierced my ears like needles. The officer tried the handle, locked. He stepped back a little, then he lunged with his shoulder, knocking the door down with a crash. The apartment was dark. The officer entered first, turning on his flashlight, followed by Wallace and me. He swept the small space with the beam of light. The kitchen was empty. The living room with the sofa bed was messy. "Devon," I called again, panic rising in my throat. That's when I noticed something on the sofa bed, a torn piece of paper caught under an empty cup. I took it with trembling hands and read the message written in hurried handwriting. "Mama found me. She said she needs to protect me from you, that you're crazy and making up stories. I'm scared, Grandma. Help." My knees gave out. Wallace held me before I fell to the floor. "She took him," I murmured, stunned. "Candace took Devon." The officer immediately radioed, reporting the kidnapping of a child. Within minutes, an operation was being mounted. Descriptions of Candace, her car, and Devon, roadblocks on the city's exits, alerts on highways and at the airport. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Candace was meticulous. She had been planning this for months. She certainly had escape routes prepared, perhaps fake documents, and she knew Devon better than anyone. She knew exactly what to say to make him cooperate, even if only temporarily. I was taken to the precinct along with Wallace, where we gave detailed statements. I showed the photos of the documents, recounted everything Devon had heard, and explained about the life insurance and Candace's growing greed. The sergeant, a middle-aged man with deep bags under his eyes, listened to everything attentively. Contrary to what I feared, he didn't treat me like a confused old woman. The evidence was too strong, especially after the accomplice. Marcus' statement began to corroborate my story. "He's cooperating to reduce his own sentence," the sergeant explained. "He confirmed that your daughter hired him to simulate a gas leak that would kill you and your grandson in your sleep." I felt nauseous hearing the confirmation of that macabre plan. "And what about Devon? He was to be paid with a portion of the insurance money. Do you have any leads yet?" I inquired, my voice cracking. The sergeant hesitated. "Not yet, but we're monitoring all routes out of the city. Your daughter won't get far." But I wasn't so sure. The hours passed, and every minute without news increased my anguish. Sitting in the precinct waiting room with an untouched cup of tea, I felt myself aging even more rapidly. Wallace was beside me, silent, occasionally squeezing my hand in solidarity. His face showed worry, but also determination. "We'll find him, Miss Sarah," he said after a while of silence. I agreed, holding on to the hope that Devon is a smart kid. He'll find a way to leave us clues. Devon was very wonderful. We had already been saved once by his brains and intuition. Maybe now they could save him. At that moment, I recalled something Devon had brought up a few days prior that I had forgotten, something about a specific spot in Candace. I sat up upright in the chair and said, "Wait, I think I know where she might have taken Devon." Wallace and the cop who was passing past the room glanced at me eagerly. 2 weeks earlier, Devon mentioned that Candace took him to visit a surprise house, a residence in the country a few hours from the city. He was pleased since there were animals and a lake. At the time, I believed it was just a day vacation. The sergeant was contacted immediately. I gave an explanation for my suspicion. "It's possible that Candace is setting up this location as a safe haven from which she would escape following the accident that would kill us." "Are you aware of the location of this property?" the sergeant inquired. Not precisely. Devon said there was a tiny town nearby. I believe the name was Cedar Ridge, or Willow Creek, or something similar. It was a clue, but not much. Within a few hours of the city, investigators started looking into property records in cities with those kinds of names that had just been purchased or rented. In the meantime, I got some concerning news. At a petrol station on the westbound highway, Candace's automobile was discovered abandoned. Most likely, she had changed cars. The quest was becoming more difficult. It was 5:30 a.m., according to the clock on the precinct wall. The sky outside was beginning to lighten a little. Fear and adrenaline kept me awake, even though I hadn't slept for nearly 24 hours. My phone, which had been returned after forensics reviewed the pictures, vibrated in my pocket at that moment. An unidentified number. With my heart racing, I replied, "Hi, Grandma." My heart skipped a beat as I heard Devon's tiny, terrified voice. "Where are you, Devon, my love? Are you all right?" "I'm all right," he muttered. "Mama is currently napping. To call you." I located her phone and concealed it. I tried to sound cool as I hurriedly gestured to the sergeant, who promptly called the technician to trace the conversation. "You are so brave, my love," I murmured. "Can you tell me where you are?" "It's a house in the country. It has a lake and lots of trees. We came by car, but it was a long drive, and I slept a little. When I woke up, we were already here. Do you see any sign, any name nearby?" "I'm unable to see anything right now. Mama may awaken." His voice faltered. "Grandma, she's different. She has strange things to say. You wish to harm us, she says. Sweetheart, don't believe her. I'm making every effort to locate you." A pause was followed by a noise of movement. Devon's voice was much quieter when he spoke again. "A mailbox is located at the entryway. It reads Highway 142, Riverwood Ranch." My heart was racing. That was the hint we required. "You are great, Devon," I muttered. "Now pay close attention. Locate a secure hiding spot. It may take some time, but the police are on their way. You must avoid contact with your mother. You get it." "I get it. The house has an antique barn behind it. That's where I'll hide. That's all, my dear. And Devon," I paused, my throat constricted, "I adore you beyond measure." "Everything will work out okay," he said. "I love you too, Grandma." Then, in a hushed voice, "She's in motion. I must end the call." The call was dropped. I leaped to my feet and told the sergeant what had happened. An operation was planned in a matter of minutes. There were a number of ranches and estates close to Highway 142 on the westbound state highway, but it would be simple to find a location called Riverwood Ranch, the sergeant added. "You must stay here while the officers were ready. We'll go get your grandson and arrest your daughter." But I couldn't just wait. Devon was alone, facing the terror of discovering that his own mother was capable of harming him and his grandmother. He needed to see a familiar face when he was rescued. "I'm coming with you," I said in a tone that admitted no discussion. "I can wait in the patrol car, far from the danger, but I need to be there for Devon." After some resistance, the sergeant agreed on the condition that I remain a safe distance away until the situation was controlled. Wallace insisted on accompanying me despite his injuries. I promised the boy I'd protect him. He simply said, and so, at the first light of dawn, we set off westward in a caravan of patrol cars. The sun was rising on the horizon, painting the sky with pink and golden hues that contrasted cry with the darkness in my heart. During the journey, I couldn't stop thinking about what had driven Candace to this point. My sweet girl, whom I had cradled in my arms, whom I had watched take her first steps, say her first words. How had she transformed into someone capable of coldly plotting the death of her own mother and her own son? Money was certainly part of the answer, but there was something else, a coldness, a disconnection that I had watched grow over the years. Perhaps it began after my son-in-law's death, or perhaps the signs were there much earlier, and I, blinded by a mother's love, refused to see them. These bitter reflections accompanied me throughout the journey as I watched the urban landscape gradually give way to fields and small rural properties. When we finally reached Highway 142, my heart was in my throat. A discreet sign indicated the entrance to Riverwood Ranch, a dirt road that wound through trees until it disappeared around a bend. The police stopped the patrol cars before the entrance to avoid alerting Candace. From there on, they would proceed on foot surrounding the property. "Wait here, Miss Ilara," the sergeant said in a firm but kind tone. "I promise we'll bring your grandson back safely." I nodded, resigned. Wallace held my hand as we watched the officers move away in tactical formation, disappearing among the trees. The minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Sitting in the patrol car, I strained to look out the window, trying to see something beyond the trees. The police radio crackled occasionally with coded communications that I couldn't understand. Then we heard a distant shout, agitated voices, and the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. That single shot echoed in the tranquil morning like thunder, making my heart stop for a second. Without thinking, I opened the patrol car door and started running down the dirt road, ignoring Wallace's shouts behind me. Miss Era, come back. But I couldn't wait. Devon was in there, my grandson, my light, the only person who truly mattered. I ran as I hadn't run in decades, ignoring the pain in my injured hip and my gasping breath. Age seemed to have vanished, driven by the adrenaline of fear. Wallace came limping behind me, trying to catch up. Rounding the bend in the road, I saw the house, a simple two-story structure with a wooden porch. About 100 yards behind it was an old barn exactly as Devon had described. Police officers were positioned around the property, weapons drawn. There was movement on the porch. I squinted, trying to see better, and felt my blood run cold as I recognized Candace. She was pale, disheveled, almost unrecognizable in the fury that distorted her face. In one hand, she held something that gleamed under the morning sun, a gun, and with the other arm, she was holding Devon in front of her like a human shield. Nobody, come closer, she screamed, her voice cutting shrilly through the air, or I swear, I'll shoot. The sergeant was positioned a few yards from the porch, partially protected by a tree. Miss Candace, drop the weapon and let the boy go. He spoke in a firm but calm tone. There is no way out of here. The house is surrounded. You don't understand. Candace shrieked, her voice cracking. She stole everything from me. My father left that money for me, not for her. She never let me touch anything. Always controlling, always dictating how I should live. I stood paralyzed a few feet away, hidden by the patrol car parked further up. Her words hit me like stabs. This is how she saw me, as a controller who deprived her of what was rightfully hers. Devon was pale, his eyes wide with terror, but strangely calm. His eyes scanned the surrounding area as if looking for an escape route. Even in that extreme situation, my grandson maintained the presence of mind that characterized him. Your father left the money for all of us, the sergeant replied, trying to buy time. Lie. Candace cinched her arm around Devon, saying, I'm sure we can resolve this without anyone getting hurt. Wallace finally came to me, saying, she manipulated the will. She always manipulated everything, and now she's making me look crazy, making up stories that I want to kill her. I tried to move forward, but he grabbed my arm. Don't reveal yourself, he muttered. The police are skilled at what they do. However, I was unable to remain motionless. It appeared to be getting more unstable by the second. Candace was clearly unstable. Her eyes were wild and wide, and her gun-wielding hand was quivering a little. Towards that moment, I saw Devon staring straight towards the barn behind the house. He seemed to be trying to tell me something as his eyes flashed back and forth. I followed his eyes and saw a policeman quietly standing behind the barn, advancing to the house's flank. I knew what Devon was up to. He was purposefully diverting his mother's attention so that she would remain focused on the front of the home, while the cops stood behind it. My 7-year-old grandson was assisting the cops despite that horrible circumstance, displaying bravery and intelligence that left me dumbfounded. Candace, I called, taking a step forward, ignoring Wallace's desperate pull on my arm. She turned sharply, the gun pointed in my direction. Her eyes widened when she saw me. You, she hissed. How did you escape? You should be dead in the fire. There was no fire, Candace, I replied calmly, taking another step. The police tensed, but did not interfere, realizing I was buying time. Your plan failed because Devon overheard everything. He saved our lives. Candace's face twisted into a mix of rage and disbelief. She looked at Devon, who held her gaze without blinking. You, she whispered to her son, you betrayed me. He didn't betray anyone, I said, continuing to advance slowly. He just protected the person he loves, just as I always tried to protect you. Protect, she laughed, a jarring, almost hysterical sound. You suffocated me, always controlling my life, my money, my dreams. When Dad died, that money should have been mine. The money was never the problem, Candace, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Your father wanted you to live on your own merits, not dependent on an inheritance. He loved you. I love you. Lie, she screamed, the hand holding the gun visibly shaking. I knew then that nothing I said would persuade her. If you loved me, you would have given me what was rightfully mine, Her mind had been corroded for years, maybe decades, by greed and bitterness, making her someone I hardly recognized. I begged, let Devon go, as I was now just a few feet away from the porch. He has nothing to do with this. It's between you and me. I saw a flash of something, hesitation, perhaps even guilt, cross Candace's face. For a brief moment, it seemed she considered my plea. It was in that instant that Devon acted, with a quick movement that took everyone by surprise. He bit the arm holding him and lunged sideways, rolling off the porch. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Candace screamed in pain. The gun fired, the shot going wild into the air, and police officers advanced from every direction. I ran the last few feet to the porch, ignoring the police officers' shouts to stand clear. All I could see was Devon huddled next to the railing, trembling. I reached him at the same moment the police officers tackled Candace, forcing her to the ground and handcuffing her. She screamed and struggled, unrecognizable in her fury. I hugged Devon with all the strength I had left, feeling his small body tremble against mine. He was alive. He was safe. "Grandma," he whispered, clinging to me. "You came. I will always come, my love," I replied, tears finally rolling freely. "Always." Over Devon's shoulder, my eyes met Candace's as she was led away by the officers. For a moment, mother and daughter looked at each other across the insurmountable chasm that now separated us. There was no longer rage in her eyes, only a desolate emptiness. The woman I had known, my daughter, seemed to have completely disappeared, leaving only a shell of what she was. And then she was gone, taken to the patrol car. I focused entirely on Devon, on the miracle of having him safe in my arms. The sun now shone high in the sky, illuminating my grandson's tear-streaked face. I ran my hand through his hair, amazed by his courage. "How did you know she was planning that? How did you figure out her plan?" I whispered as we sat in the ambulance that had come to check us. Devon thoughtfully bit his bottom lip and said, "Grandma, I always get up early. I just lie in bed and think, but my mother believes I sleep in." I stroked his face and grinned. "So perceptive. So aware of everything," he went on. "I heard her on the phone that morning. She was attempting to hide the fact that she was upset by the way she was speaking. I listened at the office door in the corridor. After taking Devon's vital signs, the paramedic moved away to speak with the cops, giving us some privacy. She talked about us sleeping and the gas. Devon lowered his voice as she said that she was sick of waiting, that she wanted Grandpa's money, and that it would appear to be an accident. His eyes suddenly grew older than his actual age as he gazed at me. If I told anyone, I knew they wouldn't believe me. When it comes to something significant, adults never trust children. I was devastated by that final sentence. How many times had he already attempted to alert me with minor details that I had written off as the product of my immature imagination? "But I believed you at the airport," I said softly. A small smile lit up his face. "Yes, you believed me when it mattered." I hugged him again, feeling immense gratitude for this small being whose extraordinary perception had saved us. The sergeant approached us, his face showing a mix of relief and concern. "Devon and you need to go to the hospital for a full checkup," he said. "Afterward, we'll need detailed statements, but that can wait a little." I nodded, grateful for his sensitivity. "Candace," I hesitated, still unable to fully process what my own daughter had become. "What's going to happen to her?" "She faced serious charges," the sergeant replied, keeping his voice low so Devon wouldn't hear all the details. "Attempted aggravated murder, kidnapping a minor, illegal possession of a firearm, among others. With the accomplice's testimony and the evidence you collected, the case is quite solid." A profound sadness engulfed me. Not for the Candace of now, the person who pointed a gun at me and used her own son as a shield, but for the girl she had been, for the daughter I had raised with so much love. "Can I see her before they take her away?" I asked, surprising even myself. The sergeant hesitated, assessing my state. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I need that closure." He nodded slowly. "I'll check, but it will be brief and supervised." I turned to Devon, who was observing our conversation intently. "Sweetie, I need to talk to your mother for a minute. Will you be okay here with Mr. Harrison?" Devon hesitated, a flash of fear crossing his face. "She's not going to hurt you again." "No," I reassured him. "There are police everywhere. We're safe now." Wallace, who had remained discreetly by our side the whole time, stepped forward. "We'll be just fine here, champ. Your grandma will be right back." Devon nodded reluctantly, letting me walk away. The sergeant led me to one of the patrol cars parked in the shade of a tree. Candace was sitting in the back seat, hands cuffed, her gaze lost in space. When I approached, Her eyes slowly focused on me. There was no longer fury in them, just an immense weariness and something that seemed for an instant like shame. "Can I talk to her?" I asked the officer, guarding her. He nodded, opening the car door, but remaining watchful beside me. "Candace," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Why?" She held my gaze for a few seconds before lowering it to the floor. "You would never understand," she murmured. "Try to explain," I insisted. "I owe it to Devon. I need to understand how you could plan to kill your own child." A spasm of pain crossed her face. I wasn't going to." She hesitated, as if realizing the absurdity of what she was about to say. "At first it was just about you, the insurance money, the house. I was drowning in debt, Mama, more than you could imagine. And Devon," she swallowed. "Marcus said we needed to include him, that 2 deaths from a gas leak would be more believable than 1, that if only you died, the police would immediately suspect me." Her voice failed. "I tried to argue that we could just send him away to boarding school, something like that. But Marcus insisted it was all or nothing, and you agreed," I said, not as a question, but as a painful realization. Candace didn't respond. Her silence was more damning than any confession. "Do you realize what you did? What you almost did?" My voice now trembled with contained emotion. "Devon is going to grow up knowing his own mother plotted his death for money. What kind of scar will that leave on him?" Tears began to stream down Candace's face. Tears. I couldn't tell if they were of genuine remorse or just self-pity. "I wasn't thinking clearly," she whispered. "The debt, the pressure. It seemed like the only way out." "There is always another way out," I replied. "You could have told me about the debt. We could have sold the house, used part of the insurance money legally. I would have helped you. You would have controlled me just like you always did," she retorted, a flash of the old bitterness returning. I realized it was pointless and groaned. "You would have dictated how and when I could use the money." Candace had a skewed perception of me and our connection that was ingrained in her consciousness. Perhaps it had always been there, growing silently, while I believed we were close. "You're going to need help, Candace," I finally said. "Not just lawyers, but doctors. There's something broken inside you that money could never fix." She looked at me, her face a mask of defeat. "And Devon will stay with me," I replied firmly. "I will do everything in my power to help him overcome this, to help him understand that what you did does not define who he is." Candace nodded slowly, as if that was expected. "You'll be a good mother to him," she said softly. "Better than I ever could be." It was the closest thing to an admission of conscience I would see from her that day. The officer indicated that our time was up. I stood up, feeling strangely lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "Goodbye, Candace," I said, looking one last time at the woman my daughter had become. "I hope you find peace someday." I turned my back and walked toward Devon and Wallace, who were waiting for me by the ambulance. I didn't look back as the patrol car drove away, carrying Candace to a future of trials, sentencing, and I hoped treatment. Devon ran toward me as soon as he saw me, hugging my legs. "Are you okay, Grandma?" I crouched down, meeting his eyes. "I am, sweetie, are you?" He nodded, gravely. "I'm sad but relieved. It's weird to feel both at the same time." "No, my love," I smiled, moved by the emotional maturity of this extraordinary child. "That is perfectly normal." In the days and weeks that followed, we faced the bureaucratic and emotional whirlwind that followed the event. Statements to the police, preliminary hearings, and consultations with child psychologists for Devon. The media tried to turn our tragedy into a sensational circus, but we managed to maintain some privacy, thanks to the sergeant who protected us as much as possible. Candace was formally charged and was awaiting trial in pretrial detention. Her accomplice, Marcus, made a plea bargain, providing details that only solidified the case against her. Preliminary psychiatric evaluations suggested a severe personality disorder, exacerbated by financial problems and long-standing resentments. Devon and I temporarily moved into Wallace's apartment until we could find a new house, a fresh start away from the grim memories of the old residence. Devon's therapist said he was adjusting surprisingly well considering the trauma. His resilience was remarkable, although there were nights when he woke up screaming, haunted by nightmares. On one of those nights, as I calmed him after a particularly bad dream, Devon asked me the question I knew would eventually come. "Grandma," he said, his voice small in the dark room, "why did Mama want to hurt us? She loved us, didn't she?" I sat on the edge of his bed, searching for the right words, how to explain something so complex and painful to a "Devon," I began slowly. Your mama is sick. Not like when someone has the flu or a stomachache. It's an illness that affects how she thinks and feels. It makes her see the world in a distorted way. He absorbed this in silence, his eyes reflecting the weak light of the nightlight. She did love us, I continued in her own way, but that sickness made her make terrible decisions, decisions that healthy people wouldn't make. Is she going to get better someday? He asked, his hopeful voice breaking my heart. I don't know, sweetie, I answered honestly. Some people with that illness get better with treatment, others don't. What I do know is that you are safe now, and I love you more than anything in this world. Devin nodded, seeming to accept that explanation for now. I love you too, Grandma, he said, hugging me. Thank you for believing me. I will always believe you, I promised, kissing his forehead. Always. We stayed like that for a long time, embracing in the dim light, grandmother and grandson, united by a bond that betrayal and danger had strengthened instead of broken. Eventually, Devin fell asleep in my arms, his breathing becoming deep and steady. I watched his relaxed face in his sleep, marveling at his courage, his perception, his capacity to love despite everything. The day Devin pulled my arm in the dark airport parking lot, pleading for me not to go home, he didn't just save our lives. He taught me the most important lesson of my life, that sometimes the deepest truths come from the smallest voices, and that wisdom is not the privilege of age. I was 70 years old when I learned to truly listen, and thanks to that, I now had the chance to watch my grandson grow up, to help him overcome the trauma, to build a new life with him where trust and love could flourish again. As I watched him sleep, I made a silent promise that I would spend the rest of my days honoring the courage of that little angel who, with a simple plea, Grandma, believe me, had changed everything. The road ahead would be long and sometimes painful. There would be more nightmares, more difficult questions, more tears, but there would also be laughter, discovery, and shared joy. And, above all, there would be truth between us, the most solid foundation upon which to rebuild our lives. The sun was beginning to rise, sending the first golden rays through the blinds. A new day, a new beginning. I adjusted the blanket over Devon, and careful not to wake him, slipped quietly out of the room. In Wallace's small kitchen, I made a cup of coffee and sat at the table, watching the city wake up outside. I thought about all the mornings to come, all the days Devin and I would have together. I also thought about Candace, alone in her cell, confronting the consequences of her choices. The pain was still there. It probably always would be. But alongside it, something new was growing. Hope that one day Devin could look back and see not only the betrayal that almost cost us our lives, but also the moment he found his voice and his courage. Hope that together we could transform that terrible night into the start of something beautiful, not an end, because deep down, that's what mattered. Not how stories begin, but how we choose to continue them. And ours, mine and Devin's, was just on the first chapter. You know, when I think back to that night, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. I spent 70 years believing wisdom only came with age, but my 7-year-old grandson taught me how wrong I was. Trust doesn't always come from experience. It comes from love, from really listening. Life gave me a painful lesson, but also a second chance to rebuild, to love deeper, and to protect stronger. So, if you ever doubt someone close to you, pause, listen, and look into their eyes. You might just find the truth waiting there. If you agree with me and liked my story, show it by sending a like to the video. Let's see how many we are. I'm curious from which city and at what time are you listening to me. Write it in the comments. If you'd like to support my journey, you can send me a small donation. Thank you for listening and sharing your precious time with me. For more life stories like this, check out the other videos on my channel and subscribe. There are 2 new life stories on screen that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click 1 to start listening now. Love.